just because your husband or your wife isn't physically present doesn't mean that problems stop. So now you not only have the absence of your spouse, now your spouse is in a war zone. So you have this thing called fear that gnaws on you at night and haunts your days. Every time he came back, I was angry and I was punishing him for making me so afraid. And I realized that my fear was owning me because when fear owns you, you are crippled by it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Communicate and Connect podcast. You're listening to episode 65, Secrets to a Successful Marriage, with veteran and military spouse Tina Erwin.
Hi, how are you? So glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here too. Thank you for being willing to be on the podcast. And one of the things that really stood out to me and why I was excited to have you here is because you can really speak to the experience of being both a service member and also a military spouse and navigating different relationship challenges that come up from both sides of that. So maybe we could start with just having you share a little bit about yourself and your experiences and who you are so everybody could get to know you some.
Well, thank you. I joined the Navy in 1972 at the height of the Vietnam War, so I'm pretty ancient. And I joined the Navy to find a husband. I don't know how to be any more honest than that. So if we're telling the truth, that was why. I also wanted to travel, and I did not want to spend my life as a martyr demanding equal pay with a man. It's the 70s, you have to understand.
Yeah.
Looking at life with yesterday's eyes. And they had to pay you the same. It was law. So I didn't have to fight that. All I had to do was be as smart and clever as a guy, and I might make it.
Yeah.
And so I had a Master Chief Petty Officer help me at the recruiting station in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was the first officer in the history of recruiting in North Carolina. And he said, "You're a little overqualified to enlist." And I said, "I want to be an officer." And he walked my paperwork through the Pentagon in the 70s. The guy was, to
Wow.
this day, I always say a prayer for him because he changed my life. And my very first day at my very first duty station, I was engaged by the time I got to my first duty station, which was New London, Connecticut, engaged with ring. And that very first day, I walked into Bachelor Officer Quarters, the lounge, and there's this guy that looks like Superman. He has on the birth control glasses, and he's tall and he's handsome. And it's like, oh my gosh, am I engaged to the wrong guy? And I was.
Oh,
And I needed the guy I was engaged to get me to New London because I was going to be a communications officer at Electric Boat Division. And when I met my husband, I knew this was the guy. It was an instantaneous knowing. And
wow.
I found a way to engineer it so that the guy I was engaged to broke the engagement and he dumped me because he was a good man. He
Yeah.
didn't deserve for me to make him feel bad.
Yeah.
I enabled him to tell everybody that the things that I wanted were unreasonable, like 5 Siamese cats, and I was going to resign my commission. I started dating my husband, Troy, in June. He was at sea most of the time. We were engaged by August and we eloped in October. All of this took place in 1973. And he was kind of stunned at how quickly things went, but I had this feeling that we needed to get things done in this lifetime and we had to hurry up. And
Yeah.
he had orders to a submarine in the Philippines. He said, "Will you write to me?" And I said, "No, dude, you interested in me? Get your orders changed to a boomer out of New London, a ballistic missile submarine." And he did. And I thought, okay, the guy's serious.
Wow. That's huge.
That was just huge. So we eloped, which was very romantic and super cool. And then we didn't have a lot of outside influences. And a lot of the outside influences are family. And not all family members like the fact that you're married to someone who goes to sea.
Yeah.
So you have an outside influence as a pressure. My outside influence was that my mother-in-law did not like me because she thought all women officers were prostitutes. So that was a little bit of a wrinkle.
Yes, that's a big
Ouch is
wrinkle.
right.
That's rough.
Yeah, it was really tough. However, we eloped in October and he went to sea in January. And so for the first 3 years, we had never spent longer from the time I met him, longer than 90 days in a row together. And during that time, I worked as a communication officer and I received for all communication and crypto gear for all 6088 class new construction submarines that were being built at Electric Boat Division at General Dynamics. And it was a very interesting job. And I needed a lot of different advice from a lot of men and who really helped me. But they still didn't know what to do with women. And Troy and I, we were one of the very first married officer couples in the Navy. I think there were only like like maybe 10 of us in 1973.
So pretty groundbreaking. You guys were figuring it out how to do it the first time.
And then all of a sudden now I'm an officer's wife and there's a wardroom. And he was weapons officer on Benjamin Franklin Gold. And it was a two-crew submarine system, which they still have today with ballistic missile submarines. And when I grew up, my mother had no friends. I did not know how to make friends. I did not know how to entertain. I did not know what was expected of an officer's wife. So I have my day job, and now I'm a junior officer's wife, and I don't have a clue what to do. And
A whole
the
second.
reputation was that military wives were awful and bitchy and gossipy and terrible. And I thought, well, what if that's not true? Why would we prejudge a whole sector of the population? But what if that's not true? My commanding officer threw a wedding shower for us after we announced we were getting married because you had to get permission. And I applied for permission and I didn't get it. And I said, I'm not waiting. We got married because we only had so much time because you can't be stationed together unless you're married. And I had to talk the detailer into sending me to New London because I showed her my engagement ring. It was the only way I got to New London so that I could meet Troy. And each of these wives looked at me like, you are so weird. You're going to walk both sides of the road here. It's a really cool experience. So my wardroom was extremely gracious. And then I met the wardroom for Benjamin Franklin, and I loved those women. A lot of them were my age, some of them had kids. The captain's wife took me under her wing. She taught me, I observed, what does it take to entertain? What is this like? And so this was really cool. So I held a party the day the guys went to sea because woohoo, the beginning of the end, we're starting it. And we opened up the party to officer and enlisted wives. And we're only talking 120 people. Not every guy was married.
Yeah.
And then I held halfway night parties and everybody brought something. And man, I'm learning how you entertain. Because if you're in the military, one of the big elements is you have to entertain and you have to go out of your way. You have to come out of yourself to make friendships, to build that bond. I've watched my daughter-in-law, because my youngest son is in the Air Force, and she and I have talked about this, and she has built those bonds and she built friendships. I have two truly amazing daughters-in-law. And then what I watched is just because your husband or your wife isn't physically present doesn't mean that problems stop. I dropped my husband off to go to sea and I came back and I turned the faucet on in my kitchen and the entire hardware fell apart and I had a geyser in the kitchen.
I feel when my husband was deployed, the same thing happened. Like anything that could go wrong did go wrong just right when he left.
Exactly. And the couple who lived next door to us, her husband was on an opposite crew. So when Troy was at sea, her husband was home. So each of the husbands would help the wives with the problem. And, we would make sure that we brought her over for dinner and that she wasn't alone. And
so important.
That relationship, the military is only about people. People think it's hardware in the mission, but it's really about relationships. And no one can create those successfully but you. And I observed that when I married my husband, I had to come to terms with he is not going to be home every day.
Yeah, that you will be alone a lot as a military spouse.
And you have to come face to face with the uncertainty of it. I remember one coffee that I held or I went to, one woman is just bitterly complaining about her husband. And I said, one, he's not a doctor. If he were a doctor, he would be on call and he would still never be home. He's not a traveling salesman. Believe me, you know exactly where he is, and he's with the finest men, literally, money can buy, in the highest tech equipment with the most wonderful other fellow officer and enlisted men he could possibly be with.
Yeah.
He comes home to you and he has only eyes for you. And we agreed to this when we got married. And of course, there was a hush in the room because that was not necessarily a popular thing to say. I said,
Mhm.
you know, I agreed to this. And this gives me an opportunity to have my identity. I'm not the assistant weapons officer's wife. I'm an
Yeah.
ensign. I have an identity. And I think that if I were to offer something, it would be, and my, again, you know, Monica and I talked about this, that she has an identity too. She's working and I was working. And then I noticed a lot of these other women, they all had jobs and they went to their jobs. And then we would get together based on those schedules. And so having that identity kept your marriage far more in balance.
Yes. To have
You
a
have a mission too.
balance.
I still have military mindset because I'm a single parent. He went to sea after we retired. So my husband spent probably 5 full continuous years at sea, spread out over a long time. But when he retired in 95 and then spent another 10 years at sea, working for research ships and captain of an oil rig and all kinds of things. But only the military has a sense of the camaraderie of other spouses. In the
Yes.
70s, there were no male spouses because we were one of the very first officers. I was, you know, like one of those. I noticed as there were new wives, we would all try to take that new person under our wing. I volunteered. I said, look, you have a problem with the Navy, let me know. Here's the terminology. I can explain things for you. Don't believe rumors. Rumors will eat you alive. Don't believe them. Only either talk to the squadron or talk to the captain's wife. She'll tell you what you can and you can't do. Respect the need to know. If your husband comes home and he can't tell you what he did or where he went, sometimes you really don't want to know.
So I'm
You
hearing
need to
you could
respect
really
that.
like orient new spouses in to what military life would be like. And I'm hearing that's kind of was your experience too. Like once you got married, the spouses that were part of his group really mentored you. And then I'm hearing you went on to then mentor new spouses that were coming in. And that
Yes, and
really played a role.
we played a role, and I did this with the commands that I had where, you know, we helped each other, where it
Yeah.
was officer and enlisted. And when you think it's difficult when your husband goes to sea and you're in the United States, it's a different ball game when you go overseas. And the Navy, and I think they still do this, I'm seeing the Air Force still does it. We've closed a lot of bases. We closed Holylock, Scotland, and we closed Rota, Spain. We still have a presence in Italy and SHAPE headquarters in Belgium and England and several. I know we have a presence in Yokosuka, Japan, and Guam. We still have a presence in many places. If you're going to go overseas, you have to remember you are the foreigner. They're not going to adjust to you. You have to adjust. And if you're newly married and that's your first duty station, that is a massive life crisis. So
Yeah.
there are many life crises in a person's life: getting married, a death, a divorce, a new baby, moving. But moving overseas is massive. And
Okay.
if your marriage is shaky and you move overseas, it can really stress your marriage.
Yeah, so this was going to be one of my questions for you was about from your experience, what do you see are really common challenges that military couples face? And I'm hearing this is one of them, all of the regular life crisis moments. And then you have extra unique ones with military life, like going and living overseas.
You have the issues of danger. And my husband took a submarine. He was the executive officer for a submarine tender during the Iran-Iraq war. He was gone 8 months, which is a long deployment. Usually we were at 3.5 or 5, but 8 months was really long. And they were, you know, I don't know how many, 100 miles at sea, and they could feel the oil cover the ship from the fires from Saddam Hussein. He'd set all those oil fields on fire. And there were a lot of people who were very afraid for their family members, for their husbands. And they were going, why are we sending a submarine tender to the Middle East? Because that submarine tender had the finest crew members, officer and enlisted on board, and they were fixing destroyers in record time. They were outfitted with equipment. So now you not only have the absence of your spouse, now your spouse is in a war zone. So you have this thing called fear that gnaws on you at night and haunts your days.
Yeah. Was there anything you did to help you with that fear?
Yes, and it didn't hit me until my husband was on research ships. And
Oh,
he had super crazy crew members, 6-inch pipes that were open to the sea, dead in the water with zero angle on the bow of super tankers that were on autopilot, and atomized fuel in the engine compartment. And he was almost blown to bits. There wouldn't even have been a body to bury. And I realized that every time he came back, I was angry and I was punishing him for making me so afraid. And then one night I had a come to Jesus moment, and I'll use that term because it's a matter of faith. I don't care what somebody's faith is, but it's a matter of a divine connection. And I realized that my fear was owning me. And if people don't take anything else from this podcast, I hope that they will take this. Because when fear owns you, you are crippled by it. And I found that that was happening to me. And I'm not a person that gives up power easily when it comes to this kind of thing. So I did a practice that anyone can do. And this is how it worked. And it took me all night. I had to face my biggest fear. What was my biggest fear? Mrs. Irwin, I'm sorry, there's been an accident. There's a phone call in the middle of the night. That was my biggest fear. I'm so sorry to inform you. And I found that I burst into tears in the middle of the night in bed, and I cried and I pre-grieved that potential phone call. Because what you fear the most, you attract. It's a spiritual law.
mm,
I didn't want to attract something terrible to my husband, and I had control over that. And
yeah.
so I lived through having to call each of the children and tell them something has happened to your father. And then I pre-lived everyone gathering. And then we went through settling the estate. And then we went through what was my life going to be like if he wasn't there. And I realized that a lot of my fear was about what was going to happen to me, what
Yeah.
was going to happen to the children. And I realized that the children were going to be all right. I was going to be all right. I would see him again. And my personal belief, he and I've had many lives together. And we got to have another one this life. I would always love him, but I needed to stop being afraid because at the end of the day, I was still going to be all right and he was going to still be with God. And
Yeah.
I didn't need to be afraid anymore.
Yeah, I'm hearing a few components in what you're sharing. There's the personal faith piece of like, I know we're going to be together again, no matter what happens. And that was a source of comfort. And then there was also this piece around like, I don't want fear to own me and I don't want to have like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm going to face my fear and I'm going to make plans for what if the worst case scenario happened? How will I live? What will I do? And just having that plan helped to reduce the fear. It's not so scary if I know what I'm going to do in the worst case scenario.
That's very true. I applied that to my children driving. And one of the biggest sources of anger or conflict in a marriage is sometimes the spouse doesn't realize how much fear is living within them. And then they project that fear onto their spouse who has a mission. They love what they do. I love the Navy. I love what I did. Sometimes the things I did they could be dangerous. I wasn't in a war zone. And Troy never worried about me. I managed 2 kids and we adopted a third, and the house and my career and all the things that happened pretty elegantly. He never once got a phone call because I felt like I could control my environment, but I couldn't control what was happening at sea.
Yeah.
And it was me coming face to face with myself and letting go of the illusion of control. And it was really helpful. I minored in psychology and sociology, so I studied so much of this myself. Fear is never your friend. And I didn't want to give my husband or my children, especially when they're teenagers, my fear. I gave them my love and my confidence.
Oh, that's
And it
beautiful.
changed everything in our marriage. It changed the entire atmosphere of the house. I could control that just through the concept of love and confidence and courage. Sorry, I was on a soapbox. I'm only 5 foot
That's
one.
okay.
The big soapbox.
I like the soapbox that you're on, Tina, because it feels really relevant to relationships. Because when I'm working with couples, fear is a really big component of what is driving a lot of the conflict. Of course, there's like surface level conflicts, but how do I deal with my own fear when it comes up? It is a core dilemma that people are struggling with just individually in life. How do we deal with our own sense of fear? But also as it relates to relationships. And then how do I talk to you when my fear comes up? So this feels really significant to me, what you're saying, which is you sort of had to face your own fear. You had to find some way to embrace it, accept it, make plans around it versus just staying in the fear or trying to distract away from it, which is what a lot of people do, I think.
Too much fear creates these elements. I'm choosing my words carefully here because the words matter. When fear zaps you, you'll see something on television or you'll think about that person and you get this zap of fear. You get a zap of adrenaline, and that adrenaline is not good for the body. Adrenaline has its place, but you have to wash that out of the body. And I use something called noni juice, which is a blood cleanser. There's a whole discussion on PTSD and how to help with returning spouses and PTSD. When you stop the ping of adrenaline in the body, because it's a physical manifestation and it's toxic for you, you're projecting it and your children feel it. Everyone around you feels it, and you may feel you can't control it. But if you go to a place of love and faith, I don't care what your faith is, it doesn't matter. Your faith is a belief and in love. Do you love this man or woman? Do you love your children? Yes. Then give them your courage, give them your confidence, give them the grace of your love every moment. I'll give you another example. Troy was at sea a lot. And one night, my teenage son and my daughter, they're 4 years apart, it's San Diego in the rain, and nobody knows how to drive in the rain in San Diego. And they're going to go Christmas shopping, and I didn't want them to go. And so they get in this big van and they're sitting in the car. And James looks at me and I said to my daughter, I want you to pay attention to your brother. He is an outstanding driver. You're going to be driving soon. I want you to pay attention to how careful, how thoughtful, and how wise your brother is as a driver. I have absolute faith in him. You two are going to have a great time. And my son starts to chuckle and he says, I know what you're doing. And I said, I hope so. I hope you do. I absolutely believe in you. And when they got back, my daughter says, Mom, James is amazing. He is the best driver. You were right. I'm so glad.
Yes, I love that. Even though there was like maybe a little bit of nervousness with the rain and other people driving, you
Yes,
were able to give him your belief in him, to show him that we could all have courage and that you believed in his ability to handle a difficult situation.
it's really important. And basically, when your spouse goes to sea, he or she is believing in you to handle everything. There's some other caveats that go with that because, my husband would be on a boomer patrol and he'd come back and he said, I'll take over the managing the checkbook now. And that didn't go over well because we can't go back and forth.
Yes,
So
hard to
we did
have control and then not have control and then like, wait, I'm used to that.
we did some marriage maintenance. And men understand maintenance. And one of the things I learned is how to speak to men so they can hear you. I observed how men speak to each other. I was the executive officer, and I'd say, you never say, oh, I have a doctor's appointment because my child is sick. You say, hey, I got a doctor's appointment. I'll be gone for a while. I'll be back. Children didn't come in your sea bag. You don't have to mention it. You have a hairdresser's appointment and you might be a while. Say, I'm leaving early, got to get a haircut. Men understand that all day long. If you say, we're having a disagreement, I think we need to stand down, male term, and have some marriage maintenance. Oh, men understand maintenance. You got to maintain your equipment. You have to maintain your relationships too.
Yeah.
So if you start to listen to how men talk and how men think, your ability to communicate will be better. When we were first married and he came home from patrol, the house was perfect. There was food in the freezer, there was food ready to go. I had 2,000 muffins all cooked and ready, and it was all fabulous. And I was so worried that a light bulb would burn out and the house wouldn't be perfect. And that was not what was on his mind, let me tell you. So I wanted him to pay attention to see how professional I was, and I got all this stuff done. And he just didn't care. And I realized that he didn't need me to be perfect.
Yeah.
He needed to be a little sexy, but he did not need me to be perfect. I also had a long conversation with a Navy wife who's really, really upset because she did the same thing. Everything was perfect. And when he came home, she said, I've taken care of this and this and this and this because she wanted him to be proud of her.
Yeah.
Look how accomplished I am. But what he heard is, you don't need me anymore.
Yeah. So common.
I said, look, you can fix what has to be fixed, but say, I really need your help with this. The kids have waited and they've so looked forward to having you help them with this. And it changed their marriage because what men don't fully grasp is when they go to sea or the deployment or wherever they're going, whether Army, Navy, whatever, Marine, whatever you are. In a marriage, you have your things you do and he has his. But when he leaves, he gives you 100%. And so oh my gosh, I'm out of balance. I'm so out of balance. And now it's like, okay, all right, I got it. I'm in balance now. And he comes back and he says, let me take this. And now you're out of balance again.
Yes. Trying to
And
figure out the weight
trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I had things that I set aside that would be best done with him. Could I do them? Yeah, with one arm tied behind my back. But most military wives are
Yeah.
really competent, sharp women. But you married your husband or your wife because you need elements of their personality, not just for the sexual relationship, but for the things you do together.
Yes.
I realized how much I needed to change to accommodate his needs. But if you've been managing at all, you have needs.
Yeah.
So by saying, I need this from you, tell me what do you need from me? You bring your relationship into a level of balance.
I love that. I'm hearing like really clear communication in that, like communicating about needs. There's also a sense of making sure we're a team when we can. Of course, if somebody's deployed, then it is on you as the spouse. But when you're together, there's teamwork there, that the load is carried by both of you, that the teamwork part helps create a sense of belonging. That's like why we're actually married, is to be together, that we are included, that we belong together.
Exactly. I had to learn those things because I did not see that in my parents' marriage. They are divorced. They both passed on now, and they didn't exhibit that. And so I spent growing up observing what they were doing in their communication that just did not work. They
Yeah.
weren't, they couldn't hear each other. And your voice is important, but so is your spouse's voice. And if you have a really bad day and you come home or your spouse comes home, you can say to them, I had a horrible day. A horrible day. I'm so irritable I could eat thumbtacks. It's not you. Please forgive me if I am really irritable. And they go, oh, okay. How can I help you? So now you've communicated what happened to you, and that makes a difference. And
Yeah.
you're going to have crises that happen that you don't even know how you feel about them, whether it's a sudden death. We had an enlisted wife with a month-old baby. Guy broke into her apartment and raped her.
Oh,
And the captain's wife who called me, and we work with the squadron, and we brought him home. And I think that military is always changing. The Navy that I knew is a different Navy today. That's the truth. The Navy's never going to be the same because people are always different. I just feel like if you can listen with new ears and you can have marriage maintenance, such as disciplining the children, and that is that if you are the person who provides the discipline, do not tell your children to wait till your father comes home, and that could be 5 months from now. It is one of the cruelest forms of abuse imaginable. If you have to deal with something, deal with it on the spot. Do not make your husband the villain.
Oh, I like that.
It's extremely important.
Parenting.
That's why, Super Nanny was such a successful show because so many people are afraid to discipline their children because they're afraid their children won't love them. Children have to respect you. They love you because they're supposed to, but you have to earn their respect. And kids are really smart.
Yeah,
And
and
if
you
you
want
have
that to be equal between both parents. You don't want one to end up being the villain. That's not good for any marriage or family dynamic if like one parent is on the outside seen as the bad guy.
my daughter knew my husband was just a marshmallow, and I was not. And she's really, really, really smart kid. And you can hold the line by keeping your word, by making reasonable, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, but it's reasonable. I never once grounded my children, not one time. I never said no. What I always said was, I had a very interesting situation. We're in San Diego. It's high school. Troy's at sea. And my daughter says, a whole bunch of us are going to go to Mexico and I'm going to be the designated driver. And she had a used Lexus that she paid for, her first car. And I said, well, can you tell me what your plan is for coming back? And can you tell me what your plan is for if they all throw up in your car? Oh, you think they would do that? I said, people who get really drunk can get car sick and it's going to be bad. And suppose somebody sticks some drugs up in your wheel wells and they have a dog walk around when you come through the San Ysidro border. Tell me what your plan is. And if they happen to arrest you for some reason, what is your plan and how is everybody going to help you with that?
You're really
And
mentoring the thought process of the teen.
let's work through this process.
Yeah.
And then there was this silence and she said, I don't have a plan. This is nightmare. I am not going. They can figure it out themselves. Thank you, God.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think people are going to get a lot from our episode here because we've kind of naturally, just in the course of our conversation, covered so much, like how to work with my own fear, to like having really clear communication, having boundaries with kids and how to help them. Like we've really covered so many of the topics that are challenging for military spouses and military couples. And I'm just thinking, is there any other words of wisdom, like final takeaways? These are the things I want people to know to help them navigate military life as a couple.
Remember that you married this person because they're a good person and you love them. I've been married almost 53 years.
Wow.
And it's not easy. Marriage is a process because both of you are always changing, whether you're military or not. If you feel like you're not communicating, don't be afraid to ask for help. And if your spouse doesn't want to go, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go by yourself and learn. Learn everything you can. You can't change anyone else, and you can't hope that anyone else will change to please you. You can only change yourself. And one other caveat, you can't want something for someone that they don't want from themselves. And you can't want them to give you something that they don't have the capacity to give. So be mindful of what your thoughts are and what is realistic to accomplish. And at the end of the day, it's only about how much you love each other.
I love all of those. And I feel like we could have done a deep dive on all of those things that you just mentioned. But I'm thinking, are you open to if people want to reach out or connect with you in some way?
Yes. I have two websites, tinairwin.com, and I do a lot of very spiritual things on ghosthelpers.com. And I've got Ghost Helpers podcast that's free on Amazon. I really love people, and my personal mission, it's military mindset, is to be of service until I take my last breath.
That's beautiful. What a lovely mission that you have. We'll have links to both of your websites in the podcast show notes. So if anybody wants to just easily go click and find you, they can. And of course, we'll be tagging you in all of our stuff too. So hopefully if anyone wants to reach out, that's an easy way to do it. But Tina, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah. While I am a therapist, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered therapy. And it should also not be a replacement for therapy. If you think you need a professional of any kind, you should definitely go find one. Until next time.